Welcome to Coffee Talks with Lely. I'm Joel Eberhart with Lely North America. Joining us today is Dan Venteicher from Honey Creek Dairy in Strawberry Point, Iowa. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
Good morning, Joel. I'm glad to be here. It's an honor.
Well, we appreciate that you're here with us. You are celebrating your 1-year anniversary with Lely. You've put in, you painted your barn red. You've put in some Lely milking robots here recently, a year ago, and you put in the Vector automatic feeding system. I was hoping that we could talk a little bit about the Vector today, and you could tell us about what are some of the great advantages that you found from it. I know in talking with you in previous discussions, you've mentioned that you're seeing some really nice things with labor and flexibility. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so part of the reason we started this whole conversation, we started the conversation well over a year ago. It's kind of amazing it's progressed that fast, but for us, it's me and my brother, Don. We both own 50% of Honey Creek Dairy. My dad farms with us, but he is getting up there in age. He's getting to the point where he kind of wants to slow down a little bit. And he was putting more hours in the parlor than me and Don were. And we knew we had to go somewhere. And this whole conversation almost 2 years ago started just doing robots. And we were touring a farm and we were kind of joking about the Vector, we don't know if we'd ever want to do that. And Leah Lang, our FMS advisor, she joked that, well, the guys that have the Vector and have the robots, they wouldn't go without it. So the next day I texted Leah, I was like, tell me more about the Vector. And it just happened a month after that. Lely was kind enough to take me on a tour to go see some farms. And for us, for the labor savings, for what we saw could be advantages, made sense to do it. And I can say what we saw, what we were hoping for was realized. This morning, by the time I walked out the door, probably a little before 5:30, and I had all the feed in the kitchen, all the different ingredients in less than an hour. And by 6:30, I was in the barn working with the robots. And the other morning, we might have had some issues going on. And if I didn't get to the kitchen till after chores, I didn't get to it. As long as there was something in there for it to keep feeding the cows with, it gives me a lot of flexibility where sometimes when you walk in the barn, you don't know what's going to happen. Something's going on. A cow needs this. You have more cows in heat than you thought or more chores to do than you expected. And it gives you the flexibility, especially when if a guy is gone for a weekend, it's just one man in the barn. You can get everything done because you can do it when you want to. It doesn't have to get done at that moment. And then other stuff gets left behind. Other stuff starts to fall back in the background and kind of gets forgotten about. And for me, on a personal front too, last weekend we had our family Christmas, and that was on a Friday, Saturday. So Thursday I stocked the kitchen full of ingredients, and I had to put a little bit in on Sunday. I was a little bit short than what I thought, but it got me through the weekend. And my brother and my dad were able to more than easily accomplish the weekend chores that had to be done. So on a personal level, for going to family events, it's been huge. But even on a professional level, when we're trying to get corn in the ground or we're trying to get corn silage done, if I get it done in the morning, it takes about an hour. And if I don't get it done in the morning, if something happens, or there was last winter, there were several mornings the ground was froze, we hauled manure. So we hauled manure in the mornings when the ground was froze, and then in the afternoon I filled the kitchen. We wouldn't have had that flexibility to just let the cows, I can't get you fed this morning. You can wait till 1 o'clock. We never had that option before. So the flexibility on a personal and a professional level has been great for us. It's been everything we hoped for.
Yeah, and that's really one of the points that when we talk about in the sales process, but it's hard to describe over videos, and it's hard to describe unless you actually, like you did, went and saw a farm. And then from your own experience have seen, the feed crane, the kitchen itself, there's a lot of benefits. So, notwithstanding that, you've seen labor, you've seen some fuel reductions. What did you see from a production side of things? What can you tell us about that when you went to an automated feeding system?
Yeah, so we were very excited about that. When we did this whole planning process, we were running through our budgets. We knew, all of 2019, we were averaging about 86 to 87 pounds of milk. So going into 2020, we knew for this barn to work, we had to average 91 pounds of milk. And we obviously kept components in mind for that too, because 91 pounds of milk, as well as I do, with low components might be less profitable than where we were with high components. So we knew we had to be able to keep those elevated too. And so for the first half of the year, we were every bit above 90, 91 pounds. And we knew we had room to grow. I mean, we were going through the startup process, getting everything figured out. And the last 3 months here, we've really hit our stride. The cows pretty consistently have been averaging about 97 to 98.5 pounds. The last 2 months specifically, we've been between 98 to 99. And butterfat's been between 385 and 395. We're getting into new crop corn silage, and we're starting to see that butterfat start knocking on 4 a little more consistently. So, on paper as is, if our components stayed the same, we're looking at around 10 to 12 pounds of milk we were able to increase, and we held components at least stable. And on this new crop corn silage, we're starting to get those components at 4 or slightly above. So we've exceeded the benchmarks that we were hoping for on production, and that's ultimately what it's all about at the end too. So it's been going really good.
Yeah. So to be fair, when you said 10 to 12 pounds of milk, that was probably inclusive of the robots as well.
That's correct. Sorry. Yeah. We're focusing on the Vector today. So yeah, we got to keep the robots in mind. So that's a good point. But backing up to December. So last December of 19, we fired up the Vector on December 5th. We fired up the robots on January 7th of 2020. So when we look at that single month, we went over 30 days with just the Vector, which I'm glad we kind of had that lag between the two startups. Our milk pounds did go up about 3 or 4. And part of that was because we had dried off some cows getting in preparation for the robots. So if we gained 4 pounds on paper, let's be conservative and pretend 2 or 3 of that was just because of the Vector. So we gained 3 pounds because of the Vector. But what we really saw was a 1/10 to a 1/10.5 of butterfat. We went from about 385 to consistently over 4. Now we were milking two times a day in the parlor, but we were seeing consistently over 4 on components, and our protein went from about 315-ish to about 32 to 323. So a little over 1/2 on protein and a 1/10.5 to 2/10 on butterfat in those 30 days that all we did was turn the Vector on. That's all we did. They were already in the new barn. They'd been in the new barn for 2 weeks already, 2 or 3 weeks. And, I don't expect differences there because all the stalls were the same. There wasn't any cow comfort increases. Everything was the same dimension, just added onto the barn. And so the only thing we did was turn that Vector on, and we saw 3 pounds of milk and a 1/10.5 of butterfat and 1/2, if not a little more protein. So we saw a definite difference from the Vector alone.
Well, and that's, we love hearing that because we've seen that at almost all of our other Vector farms, that if we feed more often, we should see that rumen stabilize. And if the rumen stabilizes, we should see some health benefits and production benefits. So that's really, really awesome to hear, Dan.
Yeah. And too, with the frequent feeding, what that gives us too is a lot more ability we can make adjustments more quickly. So normally, when we dump feed twice a day, or in the wintertime, I dump it all in the morning. Well, if we were starting to see something we didn't like in the cows, we had to wait a full day before we could make any changes. And we got on a new crop corn silage here. So we're still just making some tweaks, getting the cows dialed into that. And we thought, well, we need to up corn a little bit. So I upped the corn a little bit on T4C, and a half hour later, that batch of feed went out to the cows. So it allows us to be a lot more on time, and we can get things dialed in really quickly.
Awesome. So a couple of things I just wanted to highlight is that we talked about some flexibility, and part of that is labor. Part of that is fuel and time related to that. We also talked, about production. One of the things that we didn't hit on was feed refusal. Was one of the things that we don't traditionally feed over any longer with the feed to need. We're feeding exactly to the needs of the cow. So when we look at feed being pushed out and fed to another group, we're actually don't have that. So we're able to feed your groups the actual rations. That from an ROI standpoint, that's a fairly significant item as well. And maybe talk a little bit about the when we sat down at your dinner table and you were planning and looking, you hadn't purchased anything yet. How valuable was looking at the return on investment calculator for you?
Yeah, I think the ROI was very valuable. At the end of the day, it's guidelines, right? And that's what we need when we're trying to make these budgets and we're trying to get an idea and a handle on what this is going to look like on paper in real life. Those guidelines from the ROI for us have been very valuable. I think you guys did a really good job being conservative on your numbers. You weren't trying to promise us the moon, because on paper we can make anything look good. And the ROI really did a good job of looking promising on paper and following through with those promises as well. Because on the ROI for us, you and I looked at fuel, electricity, we looked at the refusals, and for us on fuel, we're looking at about 15 conservatively, just on diesel alone, about 1,500 a year. And that doesn't include, for the TMR mixer, we got the planetary oil. That's incredibly expensive per gallon, and that needs service once or twice a year. That doesn't include wear and tear on the tractor engine or the oils or the filters or the tires. So on fuel alone, we're looking at 1,500, but we could easily be realizing double that with the other things that come into wear and tear items. And electricity, I should go back and look at December, what that did when we just turned the Vector on. But for so far in 2020, we're down about $900 a month on just electricity alone, which on my budgets, I increased the electricity usage a little bit just with the 3 robots and a Vector. I thought surely it's going to go up. And we saw the opposite effect of that. So that's been a huge blessing. But for us too, for the feed refusals in the wintertime, especially, I think is when for our farm, when we see it the most. I watch the feed closely out at the bunk, and I watch for refusals. We'll run a Penn State shaker box if we want to see what it's looking like out there. And we just don't see much need in the wintertime to clean up feed more often than, at most I'll do it is once a week. And even then, the refusals, they smell great, they look great. It just doesn't give the cows the opportunity to sort. It doesn't give them time to sit there and knock it around all day. In the summertime, we have heat in Iowa. It gets humid. We gotta handle things differently than we do in the winter. And so in the summertime, I'll let the cows eat their fence down a little bit closer, and we'll feed those refusals, and we'll feed what's left to a heifer group or a dry cow group just to make sure it's staying fresh for those milk cows. Again, it's an Iowa humid summer. It's going to be tough with any system to keep that feed 100% fresh, but with the Vector, the benefit that we have is in the summertime before, if I had a haylage crop on the ground, I dumped all the feed in the morning and it's 95 degrees with a humid day. That feed by the next morning, by that afternoon, it's already lost some of its quality. Well, with the Vector, we're not dumping a day's worth of feed at one time. We're dumping what they need to eat right now. So it just doesn't get the chance to spoil. Whatever feed I am feeding to the dry cows or the heifers that next morning is already a higher quality than what would have been there 12 hours later with the previous system. So we still have to manage things in the summertime, but the feed quality aspects that we see in the summer are dramatically increased. So it's been a big benefit in the summer months and the winter months for our milking cows.
Those are all really good benefits, and I'm so glad that you brought those up. So if you were talking to a prospect that came on your farm, you would talk about all of these things. Would you recommend that they get an ROI calculator done as well?
Yeah, I think it'd be huge, because every farm is different, right? So we have a different electric cooperative, and we have different feed types. We have different animals that we can feed refusals to or not feed refusals to. Our tractor we had on the mixer was actually very fuel efficient. That little thing only burned probably a gallon an hour. It was a nice little tractor. Other guys are, they got a tractor that's turned up quite a bit. So they're probably going to see more fuel savings than we would too. So I think it helps customize every farm individually to wherever their expenses fall, they can realize how much of those they would save. So I think it does a good job customizing it to every producer.
Awesome. Well, we do appreciate that. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Dan. For more information, or if you'd like to have a personalized ROI calculator done, please visit your local Lely Center or go to www.lely.com and look up a Lely Center on our page. Again, we thank you for joining us on Lely Coffee Talks, and hopefully we'll talk with you again soon.